Welcome to the Startup Field Guide, where we learn from successful founders of unicorn startups how their companies truly found product market fit. I'm your host, Sandhya Hegde, and today we'll be diving into the story of Glean, an emerging startup in the enterprise search space with over 100 enterprise customers and last valued at over $1 billion. The CEO of Glean is serial founder Arvind Jain, a guru in enterprise software who was a distinguished engineer at Google before leaving it in 2014 to start Rubrik, a cybersecurity company last valued at $3.3 billion. In 2019, he started Glean and is joining us today to talk about everything from the internet to security to search. Arvind, welcome to Field Guide.
Thank you so much, Sandhya, for having me here.
I am so excited to be chatting with you. You've had just an incredible 25-year career in technology, starting at Microsoft before or maybe during the dot-com boom. You saw the birth of the internet, and now you're building Glean at a time that AI is making a search on a new space of red hot interest again. And so I'm really curious, how would you describe, the platform shifts you saw in technology as you've been a part of these companies? The internet, mobile, cloud, deep learning, and I'm curious whether this modern AI platform shift feels different to you in any way.
Very much so. So I guess we can start from the beginning of my career in the mid to late 90s. And that was the time when the internet was just taking off. Like, when we started, Amazon didn't exist, they just were getting started. It was a bookstore online. Right. And I remember being at Microsoft at that time, where internet was not a big thing for us. Of course, the core businesses there were Windows and Office. And from there, I joined a small startup called Akamai, where the objective of that company was to help people, serve, their content, on their web pages, their, media assets, on the internet, because it was hard at that time. The internet used to be it was coming up, so it was very slow. And I remember, being part of some of those early, for example, the video on the internet, use cases. One of them being in 2000, we were working on bringing March Madness online. So first, it used to be on TV, big event, and nobody imagined at that time that hey, you could actually be on the internet and watch it live, even if you're at work where you don't have access to TV. But so those were the early days. Started out with I remember with that but all you could do on the internet was have a really small, tiny sort of window in which you can actually stream the video, because the web was slow. It just didn't have enough capacity.
Right. You're given the 32 pixel box and you have to do
exactly.
It what
you have to sort of squint through it, sort of go back right. from watching it on a reasonable, we didn't have big screen TVs, but you still had a 27-inch TVs. From there you sort of go into a small window on your computer. But the good thing was that you could actually see it. You could see it at more places and then on demand. Right. So that was, phenomenal. But that was, of course, we saw the internet, come up and fundamentally change how, people build applications, how people build businesses. And then the next big revolution was mobile, in which, sort of driven by iPhone and Android. That was also very interesting. When these big transformations happen, it brings a lot of interesting technology shifts, especially for the products that you're building. So when mobile came, suddenly the way we would design our web applications at Google fundamentally changed. Right? We sort of built our applications to work on 13-inch screens or 15-inch right. screens on the laptops or your even bigger monitors. And now suddenly there was a use case for you to actually present your application experience on these really small 4-inch or 4-inch screens on the mobile. And also you had to make it work on networks which were much slower than the DSL or the cable internet speeds that you enjoy at home. So sort of that creates like a fundamental shift in terms of like how you build and architect and design your services. And now here we are in 2020s, and the big revolution now is AI. And to me, like it feels very, very different from those two big those two big phenomena, like that happened in the 90s and the 2000s, like internet and mobile, in the sense that this seems to me an even bigger transformation. In fact, I think the capabilities of the AI technology today is so unbounded, like in the sense that like we just have to completely rethink how we should build our products, or what our products should even be. Like if you think about like going back in time when mobile came, and say that like I'm running an e-commerce business. So I know that, yes, like I need to make my business now work on that mobile device. I need to change my I need to change the design of my website so that it can render nicely on a small screen. I need people to be able to order and on those small devices. So we need to make sure that my website is fast and works well on these low power devices. But it was very clear like what I had to do as a owner of a business, to sort of adapt to that new world. But now with AI, I think it fundamentally changes. Like your product changes completely. Its ability, what it can do. Like it can sort of like it can like go up like 10 levels of shift in one go. So that's sort of like the big difference that we are feeling with AI. It is in our line of business, which is we are here to answer people's questions. So that sort of sits right into the heart of like what these large language model technologies like what the technologies that they are actually bringing to play. So it actually helps us make our product much more smarter, like more like more smarter than what we thought we could be like 1 year back.
That is fascinating. I think you said it so well, which is previous technology shifts were very much about like, okay, how will my product work with this new change, right? Even with the move to cloud, it was like, oh, how will our backend adapt to this? Whereas with AI, it's what will our product do, even, right? Like it's kind of hitting the strategy at every level at the same time, which is very disorienting. It's fascinating that you started Glean in 2019, which is like kind of just before a lot of the transformer model application went from like research grade to consumer grade. What was the inspiration behind starting Glean at first?
Yeah, so before we started Glean, I was doing another startup called Rubric, and we were lucky to build a strong business in that company. And as a result, like we had really fast employee growth, and in 4 years we were more than 2,000 people in our company.
Wow.
And one thing that happened like with that growth was that we didn't get like similar gains in our productivity. Like in fact, like like on a per person basis, people were not able to get as many things done as they used to before. Everybody was struggling. Like so we felt that there was like we grew fast, but we couldn't actually figure out how to scale like our sort of get the same amount of output for the for the investment that we're putting into the business. And so as part of like trying to figure out like what was wrong, like we conducted a pulse survey and asked people that like what can we do better as a company, and like what are the key problems that you are facing today, which is sort of hindering your ability to do great work. And on this question, the biggest complaint that we got back from people was people said that, hey, I cannot find anything in this company. I don't know where to go and look for information. I don't know who to go and ask for help. And so this was like the single biggest employee enablement issue. Now, with me, like, my background, I'm a search engineer, and I was not surprised that nobody could find anything in the company. Like I myself couldn't find anything. And part of the reason was that, we were built in this modern SaaS era where like our company, technology infrastructure was basically 300 different cloud-based SaaS applications. So our company knowledge was just completely fragmented across all of these different systems, and no wonder who has the time to sort of go one by one into like these different places to sort of find the thing that you need, right? So as a search engineer, the first thought that came to my mind was that, oh, like, this is a problem that we can solve. Yes, like we can put a Google like search engine in front of all of our business content,
Right.
and that will make it easy for people to find things. And as part of like trying to actually find a product like that, we realized that there's no product in the market that is solving this problem. And in fact, like not just us, but like every company in the world, every employee in every company in the world was sort of struggling with this like massive fragmentation of knowledge across many different systems, and it's becoming very hard for people to find things at work. So we felt so it sort of felt like a very important problem to me at that time. So I, along with some of our my ex-colleagues from Google, we decided to solve for this problem and start Glean.
One of the things that I have observed in my experience with kind of larger companies that I would say pretty much all face the exact same problem that you described at Rubrik, just, as if you scale fast, which is, by the way, like the best case scenario for a startup is that you're scaling fast because you have a lot of customer demand, your product works, you have investors at your doors. So this is the good bit, right? That you get to scale quickly. It comes with this incredible feeling, especially for the folks who are there at the early stages of the company, that everything is slowing down. And I'm curious, I think I've often felt that one of the reasons why people don't prepare for this, eventuality, given that it's happened to so many people before you, you kind of should almost assume it's going to happen when you start hiring, but you don't prepare for it. Is that because it's very hard to put a number on it? Like, can you even value exactly like what is the loss of productivity happening because you don't have, good knowledge base, you don't have infrastructure? I feel like it's like this is a very undervalued investment because people can't quantify it, they just undervalue it. And they can't imagine what great looks like, so they undervalue the solutions potentially. Has that been your experience at all?
It has been. In fact, like when we were starting Glean, like one of the common feedback I would get from like people who I would talk to was that, yes, hey, this is a important problem. I know I face it. I know people in our company face it, but I'm not sure how to quantify it exactly, the problem that you're saying. I don't know, like how much value to associate to me, to it, and what are the kind of like sort of business value I'm going to actually derive from it, like if I were to put this tool in production. And that's sort of understandable. Whenever there's something new, like you're not you're sort of used to doing things one way, and it's you have to take a leap of faith, to sort of change your ways and buy something different. So absolutely, like we face this problem, but our belief was very simple. We and then like I ask people this, like think about your personal life for a minute. Do you think you can function without Google? And like, everybody will immediately tell me that no, like like that's the absolute like absolutely necessary product that we need to sort of function in our day-to-day life. And no surprise, like that one product allowed Google to make itself the largest technology company in the world. So it's a really important, really fundamental problem. And so our belief was and is that every person should have a great search and question answering experience at work. And which and so sort of that's so we sort of stayed with that belief. But over the, I think like now people are sort of seeing the value of it more, especially once like like even when we went into a more distributed work model, like because of the pandemic, and so like suddenly like leaders see that, hey, their employees are alone, like at home doing the work. They don't have help available to them. So like when they have questions, like the alternative of like waiting for somebody, scheduling a meeting and then getting their answers is just going to completely slow you down. So so it's important to self-enable people, make sure that they have tools where they can quickly ask questions, get their answers. And then now finally, I think with the, I would say like with ChatGPT, I think it has really struck like like executives hard, because now you can actually see, like it's not just that, hey, can a search engine help me find a document? Now you can see that like the technology can actually you know do like help answer complicated question and actually do a lot of work for you. For
Right.
example, you can ask this question now, what are the give me the top like the top 10 customers who are likely to churn. And like believe it or not, but like with the AI and the LLM technology, is going to figure it out. It's going to actually
Right.
go sort of hunt through information in your enterprise corpus, build like figure out like what makes it likely for a customer to churn, like what metrics are important to watch. Then it can go actually in your metrics dashboard, look at like whether those metrics are looking bad for some businesses, and actually give that answer back to you. So sort of the capability of these the reasoning capabilities of like these AI technologies that have actually gone to such level that now people can clearly see that this is going to have a transformational impact on our employee productivity. So it's no longer a question of like is it valuable, how valuable it is. Now it has become indispensable.
One of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is, what you said about taking a leap of faith, right? When you're doing something new, your early customers have to be people who had always been looking for a solution for the problem, are willing to take a leap of faith on like a half built, just ready product, and give you a lot of feedback. What was your hypothesis on who that customer segment would be, given that often people would just start with small startups for early adoption, but you're working on a problem that is much more relevant to bigger teams than tiny startups that can literally just work out of like one room. So I'm curious, what was your hypothesis for like, okay, who will be the desperate early customer for this, and how did you go about like defining like what would even be a minimum viable product?
That's a great question. So like one thing that like we're lucky um, on is the fact that Glean is a product that we use every day ourselves. Everybody
Right.
in our team
Right.
uses this product, and
Right.
every one of us has fundamentally faced this problem ourselves in our entire work career, right? Even at Google, by the way, like when we were at Google, it was incredibly hard. It was easy to find things on the internet, but it was incredibly hard to find things within Google. So it's a problem that like that we understand, like people like us face. So we started naturally with that as our first sort of target customer segment, technology companies, because we're very familiar with them. We know that people like whether it's engineers in these companies or support agents or marketing people or sales engineers or account executives, we know exactly what are their information needs, what do they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And so we so felt comfortable that like that's the segment that we wanted to first start with. And in general, like we feel like this problem actually starts to impact you fairly quickly. Like even a 50% company or 100% company, like ultimately accumulates a large number of apps and a lot of content. And at that point, like it sort of becomes a product like Glean already helps them, because we saw the experience with ourselves, because we dog-fooded the product
Right.
as we built it. When we were 50 people, we already knew that we could not live without it. That's how indispensable it becomes, because like we built our habits to sort of just so easy for us to find things, and that's what we need now. So anyway, so that was the so we sort of had a good sense of like who the end user is and who the target like buyer is, just based on our own experiences. And so we started with fast moving, sort of fast growing companies, you know, uh, typically like companies with like between 500 to 2000 employees, which are still, as you said, like are able to move fast, are willing to experiment, because they sort of like I think for those startups, they were like 3 or 4 years back, they were in that same place where they were looking for other progressive companies who could buy their product. So we see
Right.
sort of more willingness from them to buy products from ours. So that was the initial target segment for us.
uh, Lots of follow-up questions. So first you said something really fascinating, which is even within Google, it was hard to find things about Google that you needed internally as a team. So maybe that's a good segue to ask about like what is fundamentally different when it comes to consumer search and enterprise search. Obviously, the knowledge lives in kind of different places, but from a search technology perspective, what was fundamentally different about building enterprise search with Glean?
So first thing, like from a technology perspective, the internet is sort of homogeneous in some ways. Like, everything is a web page. They're all linked with each other. And so when you start to build a search engine, the first technology is to actually bring all of that content, into your search index. So you build these web crawlers, right? And, they're basically hitting, like every website in the world, fetching the web pages from them, and then sort of saving the content of those into your search index. And enterprise is very different, like in the sense that there are many different business applications, and there is no standard way to sort of bring content from all of those apps into your search system.
Right.
In the past, you couldn't even bring content from them because they were closed systems.
Right.
But now, like with the advent of SaaS, SaaS model, you have APIs through which you can actually connect with these applications and bring content so that it can make it searchable. But the issue is that every app has unique and different APIs. So that's a big part of building a great enterprise search product, is that you need to actually build these connections into all the different popular cloud-based SaaS applications, and you do that custom work to bring that in. The second big difference in technology is that enterprise content is governed. It has a notion of entitlements. Like, if you think about your company information, not all of it is available to everyone in the company to make use of. Unlike on the internet, where every piece of information is visible to all of us. So you have to actually build these measures of, like when you actually connect with these applications and bring content, you have to understand who has permissions to view that content versus not. And now when somebody comes and does a search, you have to actually you can only give them results and answers that are in the knowledge that they have access to. So that's a pretty significant technology challenge, that we've solved. And then finally, I would say the Google is really smart, right? It almost reads your mind. Like you give it 2 words, and it can make sense of what you wanted, and it's going to bring those answers back to you. And the reason it's able to do that is because there are this massive data and usage volume on the internet. Google learns from human intelligence. It learns from our behaviors all the time. Right? I ask for something, and I actually click on the third result because that I think is the best one. And a lot of other people did the same. It gives Google the signal that I can move that up, to number 1, right? In the enterprise, it's sort of a little bit different. You don't have that much data, you don't have that many people, that much usage. So you have to use sort of different, set of techniques to figure out what knowledge is still fresh and relevant, what knowledge is actually more important today versus not, and for a certain question. So you have to sort of, so what Glean does there is we actually build what we call, an enterprise graph, where we actually, take all of the company knowledge, and then we also take all the company's people, and then we sort of start to build relationships between them. So, we build, this notion of, hey, this document or this piece of knowledge is more relevant to, people in this particular engineering team. So when they come and ask a question, you should actually, prioritize those resources. So that's an example of how, when you think about relevance, you have to think very, very differently as well. So yeah, so a lot of different, it's a fundamentally different, challenge, I would say, but ultimately, solves the same, the goal is the same, which is, help answer people's questions.
Right. And how do LLMs change the game? Is it more that just, okay, now you have a much better interface for people to be able to navigate this knowledge graph with? Or does it change something about how you would want to construct the knowledge graph itself to begin with? How big of an impact was it on your, strategic thinking for how you're building Glean when you first and when was it that you were like, oh, okay, this changes everything, gotta go rethink our stack?
So the language models, in fact, large language model technology has been in development for quite some time.
Right.
When we started in 2019, we already had in our mind to use large language models to do semantic matching. Um, and in fact, we use um, open domain large language models, which are published by Google.
Right.
Like this model family is called BERT, and so we use these BERT models, which were trained on, all the knowledge, on the internet, and so they have these, really, awesome capabilities. They can actually understand, like at a semantic level, like uh, what like that these two things are equivalent. For example,
Right.
if you're looking for a user guide uh, or a product manual, is
Right.
one and the same thing. This model understands those kind of things. So we use these models when we started out, like in 2019, to do semantic to power semantic matching in the Glean search engine. So you don't have to actually exactly know the right words that were used in the documents to find those documents. You can actually freely express your questions in natural language and get the answers. So that technology, we've been using, and for a while, but I think there were what happened last year. I would say, like with GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, now with Google Palm, this the capabilities of these models, they've actually now they're at a very, very different level compared to where the language models were in 2019. And the I personally, you know never I don't think I could have imagined that this is how smart, or in fact, like I guess like I guess what the right word is. It's actually it's scary, like I would say, like how much they understand, like language. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it
No,
changes.
I think I had the same reaction where I was like, yeah, no, I understand this. It is, just token prediction, and we'll do classification. It will
Yeah,
do better classification. It will do better semantic matching. It's predicting tokens, so it will do some
yeah.
generation. Great. And then suddenly you see it like doing chain of thought reasoning, and it's horrifying because I'm not sure anyone feels like we perfectly understand how that happened.
We still are trying to fathom, like what exactly all the things that we can do with it. So some of the, like how this technology plays into like our core product. So number one, it actually helps us understand what a user is trying to do when they come and ask a question. Our ability to understand their intent goes up significantly if you use this model technology. The second thing is about presentation. So the user has asked a question, you sort of have the right, like set of documents or conversations, like a body of knowledge that actually answers their questions. And in the past, we would actually show them that body of knowledge in form of search results.
Right.
Sometimes we would extract specific answers, like if it was easy for us to extract them and show them at the top. um, but that depended on, like like only for a limited set of queries. But now what you can do is you can actually take all of that, all of that body of knowledge that is relevant for that question, and you can actually take the LLM and ask it to consume that and actually precisely answer the question for the user. So
Right.
synthesize it, summarize it. Don't make them go through like 10 different documents. Don't make them go through 30 pages on a single document. Instead, like answer that question in a very effective way. So that's where the power of these models come in. So like, yeah, so it's actually like in some ways, it changes the search experience fundamentally.
How do you think the ecosystem will evolve in terms of this idea of kind of knowledge management being a very kind of narrow market and use cases in terms of like idea of like, oh, we'll spend software on knowledge management, right? Like if you talk to people about like the category of knowledge management, it was, like, oh yeah, like Atlassian has like a business, and so few specialized things like sales enablement, which is kind of knowledge management, but it was considered a small space. And I feel like this will essentially create a much larger category of software that is around whether you call it research or knowledge management or search, like whatever the names are, but it's basically automating this act of I'll go consume 10 documents, which are hopefully the right, 10 documents, and synthesize what I'm learning for that, either for myself or to present to 20 other people. That was this literally the work that pretty much every like white collar knowledge worker does. At either a small or a big part of their workflow is that, right? It's definitely a considerable part of my workflow, for example, is just that. And so it feels like this will just make that category of software 100x bigger. So I'm curious how you're thinking about like what are all the ramifications, and how does this change Glean's vision in any way? Does this mean there is an even bigger opportunity for you to chase?
So like I think our mission, and like the way we've actually looked at our opportunity, we've always thought of ourselves as that, like, hey, we could be, that the de facto search solution for all businesses in the world, which means that every person, every worker in every business is using Glean 10 times a day to get more things done. So the vision, like, has always been there, but now we feel like, it's actually closer in terms of like, how we achieve it. And in some ways, like the way to think about like, what is this new product? When we started out, we always called ourselves, the work assistant. It's not just that, like, hey, when you have a question, we will answer that question for you. Part of like, helping you be more effective at work is also to surface, relevant information to you, so that you can be knowledgeable,
Right.
in your job. Part of it is actually helping you understand that what things need your attention today, right now. So there's always been that discovery element, which is also part of Glean. And now if you think about it, so you think about like the way to describe Glean is that, imagine a imagine a an human and an expert in your company, that has been there in the company since, the beginning, from day one. And they've actually read every single document that has ever been produced in your company. They've been part of every single conversation between any two people. And they have the magical capability of not forgetting anything. And now they're actually, available to you 24/7. Like whenever you have a question, they can use all of that knowledge that they've been, that they know about, and they can also use their their human expertise and actually, quickly answer your questions. So imagine like what that does for you. What does that do for your work? And I think that's the vision that's now becoming reality with these, like, advances in AI technologies. So yes, so it's a big market, and for us, like, we don't think of it as, if you think about it, it's not just knowledge management, it's not just like, knowledge access. It actually goes beyond that, because the technology now is actually also, it's also like a command center for you. It can actually do things for you. You can ask it to, write something. You can ask it to actually take actions on your behalf. And that's sort of where we are still trying to figure out, like, like how do you focus, and how do you, use this technology in, in a focused fashion. Because I think, and that's what I was referring to you before about, this technology is so powerful that I think like everybody's, like everybody feels like, there's so much, that you have access to, you can bring great experiences, but then you have to figure out how do you focus. So anyway,
how do you focus? How do you control? You almost want to like put more guardrails in place. And maybe speaking of focus and kind of, this broader vision, how are you tackling hallucination? Given that like that's, a uncomfortable but okay feature if you're just like generating content. But probably a deal breaker if you want to like really rely on accurate answers for questions about facts, like, oh, like who are 10 customers at risk of churn. Like I want to be absolutely sure that it named 10 customers that actually work with my company and have risks involved. How are you dealing with the hallucination problem?
Like if you think about these models, they feel like they know everything, because the way they're built is that they're going to actually predict, the next piece of text.
Right.
And So like the natural instinct of these models is that you can ask any questions, it's going to actually produce an answer.
Right.
And it could be random. It could be like complete, like it's a false statement that they can make. And so there is obviously work happening, in terms of how do you control that, and like how do you actually teach it to sort of say that, okay, no, I have not seen this. Like I don't have the ability to answer this question. But the way, but I don't think it's there yet. So you have to work hard on it. So we use these models in a different way. We use them in a very constrained fashion. And what we do really is we combine the power of a good search technology with the reasoning capabilities of these models. So the end-to-end flow for us is, a user comes and asks a question. Now, this is the use case where you cannot give them a random answer. You have to give them a precise, correct answer because they're going to rely on it, right? So the first thing that we do is we take that question that the user has asked, and then we figure out, through our search system, what is the body of knowledge that you can actually use to answer this question. Try to find the most relevant documents for this particular question, and also limit them to documents that that I personally have access to, so that don't answer questions using knowledge that I'm not really authorized to use. So we do that part, and it sort of generates a body of knowledge for a given question. And then when we invoke the model, we actually tell the model that use only these documents to answer this question. And that is sort of that is how you ground it. That is how you sort of ensure that the certain piece of knowledge that you're actually okay with the model using is being used to produce the answers. And then we actually also make sure that we are creating citations, so that we're actually always, when we answer questions in Glean using these models, we'll actually say that, hey, we picked up this answer from these two resources. Right. So that's basically our solution for hallucination is constrain the model with the right knowledge, and tell it not to use the inherent knowledge that it has from the internet.
Right. Yeah. Don't trust the pre-training data.
Yeah. So use only the language capabilities of it, not the knowledge, not the knowledge that is inside the model.
Yeah. Don't use that Reddit feed for answering our questions.
Exactly.
Makes sense. So we're switching gears a little bit to go-to-market strategy. I see a lot of AI startups really trying to leverage more product-led growth, given that they have to teach customers what the capabilities of the product even are, and being able to let them play with it themselves before pitching a deployment seems to be very effective. But then there's kind of issues around security, privacy, all of that. So what are you trying to do with Glean in terms of at scale go to market strategy?
Yeah, so Glean uses a traditional enterprise sales model, where we are actually not having individual users sign up for Glean and start using it. We typically go and work with the CIO or the technology team at our customer, and work with them in a proper framework and bring the technology to their entire organization. So that's the model that we follow. And it's really important for a product like Glean, because we connect with all of your company information.
Right.
And so with that, security is a very, very important consideration. You need to make sure that we're compliant with whatever policies are in place at that organization, in terms of where data can reside, who has access to it. So it's very important to be careful in that sense. And the product led growth kind of model, where individuals are signing up and sharing their sensitive company data with Glean, we believe that's not the right model. So that's so therefore we've actually gone with that traditional, work with the security team at our customers, work with the technology team, and roll out the product in compliance with their requirements.
And maybe a broader question about the ecosystem. The growth funding environment right now is incredibly tough, and if past data is a guide for us. It's not over. Like we haven't, probably really hit the bottom of this bear market yet, and venture growth funding, or maybe even the public markets. So it's going to be, at least another year. At least that's kind of what we are planning around. Having been a founder several times, having kind of seen a lot of the ups and downs of the technology market cycles, what's your advice to founders who, only have 12 months of less of or less of runway right now, and are kind of thinking through, okay, I don't have a lot of runway. Also, there's been like this, big technology shift that has potentially created even more opportunities for like what my team can try in terms of, either pivoting or, expanding our product vision. What would be your advice to founders like in this situation right now?
Well, so if you are like an early stage company, which is still sort of looking for product market fit, then I feel like you're not as impacted. I think like I think we are, and especially with the AI revolution that we're in the middle of, there are amazing opportunities for companies to build new products, that will have capabilities that people have just not never seen before. So I think there's plenty of opportunities, and I think folks should actually just focus on building the great product. And I hope I guess I'm an optimist in that sense that we build a great product and you will basically get the funding to sort of further grow the company in the future.
Right.
But if you are in the somewhat like you mentioned growth stage before, and now you are you have 12 months of runway left, and for me I don't know the details of this because we've not been in the market. Luckily we have the funds to actually keep investing in our technology and build the company for the long run. But that's a tough situation to be in. And I mean, I think sometimes founders are they're very sensitive to taking a new new round of money with lower valuation than before. And I think that should sort of probably be removed out of the equation. I think building a company is a long term thing, and I think these short term fluctuations don't matter. What's important is to keep your company capitalized to the right extent, and it's okay to sort of sometimes go and do a down round, in my mind.
Yeah.
But I think the usual advice that of course everybody is saying today is that be run the ship in a tight mode, and conserve as much cash as you can. Try to grow the business with few people, and because you don't know when you're going to be able to raise money again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Arvind. This was absolutely wonderful. I know our founders will also enjoy listening to it a lot. And I definitely did, and took away so many ideas around how my own workflow can change in the future. And looks like we'll all be using products like Glean.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandhya, for having me. This was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Startup Field Guide with Sandhya, an Unusual Ventures podcast. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you liked what you heard, please rate our show and help us reach more aspiring founders with lessons on how to find product market fit. Thanks for listening. Until next time.